Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're about to start. Dale, you may go ahead.
Welcome,
Unmute.
everyone. My name is Dale Smith, Product Development Agronomist for the Northwestern region. Welcome to another one of Carbon Chemical Jamaica Limited Zoom training sessions. Today we'll be looking at pests, more so insects and mites, and how we can go about identifying these pests and also managing them using our chemistries. So we'll first start off screen. Can't move the screen, George.
Okay, Dale, allow me to share my screen, please. Go ahead, Dale.
Firstly, we start by defining what we consider as pests. And we have many definitions out there, some very broad. But as it relates to agronomy and crop protection, we consider any organism that competes with the farmer for food and space in his crop area or farm, and that organism may cause loss, economic loss, we consider them to be a pest. So we therefore cover organisms that are destructive, ones that can cause injury, they may spread disease, or they themselves or as a result of their activity may reduce the economic or aesthetic value of our crops. So very wide terms to be considered when thinking about pests. So we can also extend these meanings to include maybe not only insects. So in a very broad statement, organisms. But we will narrow this down to insects and mites, as these are the specific pests that we will be dealing with today. Slide. Now, once we are able to clearly define what a pest is or what pests are, we can therefore move forward in breaking down the two categories of pests that we're looking at, insects and mites. And it's a very common error or mistake that we often make in the farming sector to think of all creepy crawlers as insects. So we use it very widely again. There's an insect on the plant, there's an insect there, but really and truly, insects actually have 6 legs. So they are 6-legged arthropods, and they have 3 main body parts: a head, thorax, and abdomen. So these are features that we can use to quickly identify, is this an insect or is it not an insect? 3 distinct body parts: head, thorax, and abdomen, and they have 6 legs. And they tend to go through different stages of development, what we call metamorphosis. So they sometimes have a complete metamorphism, complete change, where they move from an egg gradually to a larval stage, they pupate, and then they become an adult. So we call that a complete metamorphism: egg, larva, pupa, adult. 4 distinct stages that oftentimes may require different approach in terms of control. An incomplete metamorphism is one in which the larval stage and the pupal stage are absent. So we move from an egg to a nymph, which is a small version of the adult, and then from there on, different molting of that nymph to reach the adult stage. So an egg, emerging from that egg is a very small version of the adult, and that nymph will go through second nymphal stage, third nymphal stage until it reaches an adult. So complete and incomplete, and that's for an insect. Mites now also arthropods, but they have 8 legs and they have no definite head. So the head is fused to the thorax, and we call that a cephalothorax. So they have a cephalothorax and an abdomen. So you get this kind of wedge-shaped upper body, then, so to speak, to give you a rough idea. They have 6-legged larval stage and an 8-legged nymphal stage. So the adult will eventually have 8 legs, and we consider, like in Akar, they are called arachnids, so mites, spiders, scorpions, they are close relatives to mites, or closer relatives to mites than what you might consider broad spectrum insects. So quick note, mites have 8 legs, insects have 6 legs. So whenever again you're out in the field, you can do that leg count to ensure that, yes, I'm dealing with an insect, no, I'm not dealing with insects. Moving along. Now, it is very important for us to identify these insects, not merely from a I want to know standpoint, but from a standpoint of knowing what action to take, right? So knowing or being able to identify the pests will allow us to carry out the correct action or even decide the appropriate pesticide to be used in controlling the pests. It can also reduce our costs. More, in a case where you might be applying a pesticide, and I'm using general term, broad term pesticide, you might be actually treating a mite or a mite situation with an insecticide, and you are seeing no result. And you have been spraying weekly, and yet you are seeing no result. This is a case where correct identification from start would have reduced all those costs that you incurred in spraying the wrong pesticide. So it's very important in identifying to save costs. It can also prevent unwanted risk or exposure to persons and the environment. Similarly, from the example just given, you have been using the wrong pesticide, putting yourself in and other person unnecessary risk of exposure, and also the environmental load that might be having. Whereas if you had used the correct pesticide, then you can see where that also saves time. And we know time is money, time is important. Time could have been used to do something else on the farm, time could have been used to do something else in your life. So it's not just identifying the pests from I want to know from a biological point of view, it's also how this identification can be used to impact other areas of farm operation and also your overall cost. Slide. Some of the common pests we face, and remember we're focusing on insects and mites, are aphids, whiteflies, THRIPS, caterpillars we often see as larvae, grubs, worms, and mites. And these cover a wide cross-section of crops. So we're speaking about from tree crops, fruiting tree crops, leafy vegetables, and fruiting vegetable plants as well. So these pests are found over a wide range of crops. Thus, we consider them to be the most common. And here we are giving you some visual of what aphids are like. And most of the insect pests that we'll be looking at, as well as mites, are soft-bodied sucking insects. And as such, they are found on the softer portions or softer parts of the plant. So you'll see them mostly on the underleaves, closer to the stems, or in the peduncle area of the leaves as well. So these are aphids, and you know how they are grouped clearly? They are sucking. So these are piercing sucking insects. Slide. Whiteflies, very aggressive pests. And as I mentioned before, in pests that have a complete metamorphosis, oftentimes the different stages of development can be seen on different parts of the plant. So in the eggs, they are on the underleaves, they're located on the underleaves, the nymphs hatch from there, whether complete or incomplete. And adults now become very mobile because they are winged, so they're able now to move from the underside of the leaves to all over the plant, as well as neighboring plants. So they're able to move from plant to plant and can therefore be very damaging to the crop. So it's very important to understand the type as well as the stage of pest development in order for you to carry out an effective control method. THRIPS, another very aggressive pest that is seen over a wide cross-section of crops, and they cause damage to not only the plants in terms of leaves and stem, but also directly to the fruit. And this is one such area where the pest will reduce the value of the fruit or produce by reducing the aesthetic value. So in this picture, we are seeing a tomato fruit, and though the nutritional value has not been depleted, nor are we seeing any physical holes or bores to the fruit, the scarring left behind by the thrip damage has reduced the aesthetic value, and therefore this fruit could not be sold as an A-quality fruit. Therefore, the value of the product or of the produce has fallen. So we can directly see a relation between how pests can affect the economic value of our produce. So this is one such reason why we have to get them under control, and why it is very important to understand and properly identify them so that this control can be specific to reduce our costs, to reduce the load on the environment or potential risk on the environment as well as the person. So these are the reasons for proper pest identification.
Dale, there's a question in the chat.
Yes.
I've heard ants are the culprits who transfer aphids and mealybugs to plants. Is this accurate?
Not really. Let's remember. All right, I didn't want that. Okay, well, let's go there. No, what happens is that these piercing and sucking insects, when they carry out their piercing and sucking action, the plant actually exudes certain sap, or they themselves leave certain sap, which is called honeydew. And the ants are attracted to that honeydew. So it's a symbiotic relationship between those pests and the ants, that the ants now, in wanting more honeydew, willingly carry these pests to other plants or other parts of the plant so they themselves can invade those plants and produce more honeydew for the ants. So it's a relationship, that symbiotic relationship, kind of what we call mutualism, that they both benefit. The pests benefit from the ants by being carried to a new location. The ants benefit from the pests by getting the honeydew. So it's not really that the ants spread, but yes. So if it's a case where you are seeing ants on the plant, it generally indicates that there is some form of a sucking pest there and the honeydew is there. So you would need to control both the primary pests and the ants. Hope that answers the question. Larvae, cutworms, caterpillars, worms, and we already know how damaging these pests can be. I mean, the fact that they have chewing mouthparts mean the damage can be very extensive over a very short period. So you might come in one evening and see your cabbage plants looking whole and under extreme pest pressure the next morning, they are strainers. So we call them gormandizers at this time because at this stage of development, the larval stage, they consider what we call they eat the gormandize. So they eat and require a lot of nutrients because they're going to go through that metamorphosis where they change. Remember, these are lepidopterans, so the adult will be a moth or butterfly, or in this stage, it's a diamondback moth, so it'll be a moth. So that complete change where before it pupates and then it requires a lot of energy to do that. So the pest in this stage is just gormandizing, pulling up on a lot of food to go through that final stage of development to emerge into the adult. So they are very devastating. So definitely need to be controlled using the right chemistries. As we've just realized, we've gone through pests with two different mode of action in terms of feeding, or two different types of feeding action. Piercing and sucking in terms of the whitefly and aphids. The thrips actually have what we call a rasping mouthpart, they scrape on the lower side of the leaf. So you see some etching on the leaves. And then now we have caterpillars that actually chew. So the feeding action also dictates the corrective measures to be taken in terms of selection of chemistries. Very important we pay note to that. Feeding action of the pest will dictate the correct chemistry to be used. Okay, slide. Mites themselves are sucking, piercing, sucking. However, we've already distinguished the difference between mites and insects. So the control approach will have to be that much different in order for them to be effectively controlled. And they are very small, in some cases, not able to be seen with the naked eye, and therefore can oftentimes be overlooked. Oftentimes, we do not see the mites themselves. We only see the damage that they have created. So equally important is being able to identify the signs of mite damage or the signs of mite presence in the field. And we don't want to wait till the field has been completely destroyed to say, oh, yeah, we actually have mites. No, we need to be able to make early detection. So in order for us to do that, we have to actually know how the healthy plant should look. And any deviation from that healthy look should be an indication that something is wrong. So just for a quick recap, mites are very small. Oftentimes they can be overlooked. So it's very important for us to be able to identify the signs of mite presence in the field. An early sign, you might realize that there's some amount of bronzing on the leaves of the plants. The leaves don't look as green. You might also realize that there's less shooting or production of flowers, or as soon as the flowers are produced, they are being aborted. These are later signs. You might realize that on the newly forming fruits, they are small and also aborting. On mature fruits, you might starting to see some rusting or increased bronzing on the fruit, as we put it. And in advanced cases, now you're going to see some wilting, you're going to see leaf curling, you're going to see the changing of leaves, going from a green to a bronze to a yellowish look. Now that's a very advanced stage, and that would want to avoid. So it's a very, very important pest that has a devastating effect on farm income as well as aesthetics of the crop. So it can wipe out the plant as well as affect the present yield in terms of crop. Good. Now, at CCJ, at Carbon Chemicals Jamaica Limited, we always preach the IPM approach, and therefore, chemical approach should be the final step in that overall IPM, Integrated Pest Management Program. So scouting, which is monitoring. So we speaking about monitoring now. When you monitor your field, the aim of monitoring in this field is to have an understanding of what is happening in the field. We're not taking an action yet, we're monitoring. So scouting is a monitoring activity where you walk the field, you're able to walk the field, and it is at this point now, if you see one or two pests of a low pest pressure, you can physically remove them from the field. If you are seeing one plant that is looking extra wilted and it won't go, you can remove that from the field. So that's scouting. And it's it's a very useful method of monitoring your pest population, because you're able, at each time you scout, to quickly get a rundown of what it is happening in the field. Sticky traps, they also can be used as first line deterrents of certain pests. The sticky traps, you can look and directly see, and from that you can determine the pest pressure on the field. In a low pest pressure situation, they themselves can be the first line and maybe the only line necessary in terms of your pest control.
Dale?
Yes, Georgia?
Mr. Wilmot has his hand up. Go ahead, Mr. Wilmot.
Yeah, thank you. I was listening to the proceeding here. I was wondering, is there some maybe lower dose precautionary pest control that you can use that mean to more or less discourage any insects from coming even before the plant is infested?
Let me see if I get, which is actually what an IPM method is, Mr. Wilmot. Because in an IPM method, we first practice the cultural, we speak about cultural practices, that means weeding, the spacing, the proper spacing of the plants. All of these things will impact on how readily the pests will gravitate to your crop. You can also plant border crops that can help to take away the pests from the major crops. So that's what I'm speaking of when I talk about IPM, Integrated Pest Management, things that we can do way before we start using pesticides.
Right, good.
Right, so that's actually what I'm on. So that's a very good note. So that is the aim of an IPM program.
To avoid using chemical option.
Right, not really avoid, but even avoid or reduce, because in that program, the chemical or pesticide approach is the final straw.
Right.
So the farmer should have been doing everything else before using the chemical, because we have seen some farms where the field is overcrowded with weed and the farmer's first instinct is to spray insecticide. It never dawned on him that if I have weeded out the field, the pest wouldn't be here.
Yes. I think that sometimes some of the farmers looking at, because sometimes the weeding, if you have a lot of weeding to do in a large plot, it can become quite financially challenging. So some of the people trying to see which is the cheapest way, really, it end up becoming an economical question as opposed to a best practice.
True. And that is one of the things, I don't want to digress much from the pest, but that is one of the reasons why we always try to strive for best practices, because when you speak about best practice, we are speaking about doing the right thing at the right stage. So when it comes to field preparation, when the farmer is plowing the field, turning soil, we have
stale bedding.
We have pre-emergents that can be used to prevent those seeds from popping up very early.
Like the Dactyl and those chemicals.
Like Prowl and Benzene. Yes, we do have those pre-emergents that can offer that farmer that extended level of control before the weeds start to overpower the plant. So it's about best practices and the farmers getting on board with best practices.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem, man. Also, in the CCG approach, we include our adjuvants because we've realized that the chemistries are there. The chemistries, however, can be challenged by our conditions that we have here in Jamaica. Being a tropical region, we see the sun, we see the humidity. Our farming practices may somewhat differ slightly. So therefore, the use of adjuvants is a good way of improving the efficacy of these chemistries so that the control of these pests can be that much greater and therefore give you, the farmer, buck for your, or savings for your buck, value for your buck, whichever way you take it. So products like Newfilm P, which is an advanced spreader sticker, Exit Breakthrough, which are adjuvants that can pull through the product, are great in improving efficacy, locking those chemistries, and therefore extending the life. So we're speaking about shortening or extending rather the interval between spraying, because these adjuvants would have held the chemistries longer, would have been able to pull those chemistries inside the plants and therefore have a more effective control over the pests. So that is it, in a nutshell, the CCG approach. IPM method and adjuvants, use of adjuvant. For aphids, and most of these sucking insects, as I've been mentioned before, they are found on the underside of the leaves. So it therefore means this quick blow over top that a lot of farmers that we are guilty of will not be really effective when controlling these pests. Luckily, however, we realize this and we say, oh, we're going to have to use chemistries that can actually do that, Caprid is one such chemistry. It's a systemic insecticide, but it also has this translaminar effect, so it's able to move from the outside of the leaves and pull through to reach those aphids that are on the underside of the leaves. So it's very important that we read the labels of our bottles and really understand as well. So aphids have a wide range of colors. Some of them green, brownish, some of them brown, dark brown, nearly look black, and then they have some yellow in color. And as I said, the different stage of development, the younger ones tend to be lighter in color, right? And a lot of times, this was a question that answer to the question that was asked earlier. The honeydew secreted from the aphids can attract ants, and then the ants move them. But also of note is that it may also encourage the growth of sooty mold. So that sooty mold is that dark, thin layer that you see covering the leaves. And you say it's a fungus, but when you rub it with the leaf, it comes off. That's as a result of the presence of some sucking insects feeding there. So the sooty mold is generally an indication that you have some form of sucking insects there as well. Sooty mold and ants. So for aphids, we have Caprid, Cartrax, Danitol, And these are all used at a very low rate. Caprid Cartrax, 1/2 to 1 teaspoon. And we have varying PHIs, the pre-harvest interval. And as always, I will always stress this. It's very important for the farmer to know the pre-harvest interval of the pesticide being used. This can help to determine how safe the produce is and when the produce is to be harvested. So we would like to use the shorter pre-harvest interval chemistries and crops that are ready to be harvested. At no point in time we want to harvest a crop within the pre-harvest interval. So it says 7 days and you're harvesting at 5 day, 4 day. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable at all. So it's very important that we take note of the pre-harvest interval of the pesticides being used. Good. And for note as well, when it comes to sucking insects and the soft-bodied rasping type insects, you want to find a product or chemistry that is systemic. So therefore it's able to be pulled in through the plant leaves and then effect its control. Whiteflies, again, we know them, very persistent, found on the underside of the leaves. As a matter of fact, when the pest pressure is very high, they are found all over the plant. You don't even have to wait to see them on the underside of the leaf. They are all over the plants. So this is very important. And when you see this kind of pest pressure, you know that it's time to get to business. So that is why, again, we have rates and range of rates to work with. Because in a situation where the pest pressure is very high, we would move straight to the high rate. So a field with whiteflies, very low pest pressure, you scout to the field, you realize you're having a few whitefly flaring up. Recommended rate, 2.5 mL. But if it is a case where you are seeing a high pest pressure, it makes no sense to start at the 2.5. We have to drop that pest pressure immediately. So going straight for the 5 mL. And the aim is to drop the pest pressure. Not zero the field where you see no living thing in the field. You know? That is never the aim of a pest control program. And I want to make that clear. The aim is not to zero the field to see no living thing or any living thing. It's to reduce the pest pressure below what we call economical threshold. We don't want the pest or the presence of that pest to be causing any economic loss to our crop or produce. So that is the aim. And with that in mind, we now can understand the responsible use of pesticides. Not just coming and loading up the sprayer and then one time they spray in the field and come back the next 5 days and spray in the field and just repeat it, spraying. No, that's overuse and that's a wrong, and we preach against that. So that's why we'll always preach responsible use of pesticides. And once we preach responsible use of pesticides, then you should know that it falls at the last of our IPM program. THRIPS, pale yellow to light brown, adults. And as I said before, because they have rasping mouth parts, they leave small streaks and scrapes. And they affect the fruits and all of the plant. So it's when we speak about pests that can affect the aesthetic and economic value of the crop, this is one suspect, very devastating. So it's damaging the plants to prevent the plant from producing new fruits, and then itself damaging the fruits to drop the value of your produce that you currently have now to be harvested. So you can see how important it is to get this particular pest under control. We use a wide range of products, and you realize that because a lot of these are similar in terms of how they feed, some of the chemistries can be rotated. So we are seeing caprid again. Cure can be used also, and indicar. Cure and caprid are used at a similar rate, 2.5 to 5 mL, and cure, like Caratrax, has a very short PHI of 3 days. Indicar, 7 to 14 days. So again, this should position based on your field maturity, based on your setup for when you have to harvest, based on your sales and market. You should know if it is safe for me to go in with an indicar, knowing that the PHI is 7 to 14 days. Cutworms, caterpillars, I'm using this in a very broad term. Cutworms, caterpillars, the actual lepidopterans, using a very broad term to include also beetles, weevils, which are coleopterans. So they, again, because of how they feed, they have a thin mouth part, the damage is very extensive over a very short period of time. So this strainer cabbage we're seeing on the right there is just a quick view of how devastating their feeding action can be. And therefore, based on how they feed, we want products or chemistries that are aligned with their feeding action. So we want something that when it coats the leaves and they come in and chew, because remember, these pests are not necessarily found on the underside of the leaf. Most of these pests are mobile. Beetles, for the larvae themselves are mobile and can move along the plant and find themselves in the most succulent areas of the plant, like in a cabbage. They move from the outside and work themselves all the way or to the inside, or they are laid, the eggs are laid on inside and they eat their way out, whichever way, right? So you want a product that once it comes in contact with the plant surface or any part of the produce, once they consume it or they pass through it or touch them, then they will be controlled. So Caratrax, indicar, and mimic are such products. They are contact, and therefore the indicar, mimic are contact, and therefore provide that rate of control. Mimic, however, no, George, go back. Mimic is what we call an IGR. Not going too deep, but it's an insect growth regulator. So it kind of works differently from a lot of these chemistries, where these chemistries will render the pests or slow it down on contact, or when it chews, because they are stomach contact. So either when it chews or feeds on the part of the plant contacted, or the spray touches it directly. Mimic, however, what it does, it kind of forces the pest to mold. So before it is even ready to move on to that stage, it shuts down the system and causes it, tricks the system believing that it's ready to move on, and then it dies. So it stops feeding because the thinking is ready to move on to the next stage, but actually shutting down and it dies. So a product, if you're thinking about greener products or softer chemistry, this is one such product that is very effective and works in a very complete different way than a lot of other chemistries. Slide. Mites. Now for this particular pest, as I mentioned before, oftentimes we don't say the pest itself, but we say the damage that it creates. The control of this particular pest is one where I would definitely recommend the use of adjuvants. Adjuvant definitely throughout the rest of the pest control, but for mites, surely something like exit or breakthrough, because we need to ensure that the product is being pulled through the plants so that you can extend the residual effect of those chemistries or of these chemistries. And that is the reason why we have this combination of chemistries in terms of cure and nizaran, because they are able to give a complete control by attacking the different stages of this pest development. So the cure is able to control the adults. Again, it's at a very low rate, 5 milliliters, and this has a very short PHI of 3 days. The cure is effective in controlling the adult, but we know that mites reproduce very quickly. So once you spray with a pesticide, that can control the adults only. But you think what happen to the eggs that are left untouched? They themselves turn into adults. And then you continue to spray, and it is costing you to spray, and it is taking up your time to spray. And there's more load on environment when you spray. All the things you've mentioned before about proper identifying the pest. And then what? So Nizoran now prevents that. So Nizoran is an oovicide that is able to kill the eggs, because the egg has that protective egg sac, a lot of pesticides. Nature works well enough. So the egg naturally has that leathery protection to prevent a lot of these pesticides from reaching inside. However, Nizoran is able to go through those defenses as it is an oovicide. It's a chemistry specifically designed to do that. So it can control the eggs, and it has a very short pre-harvest interval of 1 day. We recommend that you use this twice during the crop cycle because we don't want to cause any tolerance build-up in the generations of pests to come. And that is that's that point by itself that we can also look into. Overuse of chemistries leading up to tolerance of insects, and therefore a persistence of the pests in generations of crop and farming produce to come. That is why in certain farm areas, every time, certain year for sure, we can expect to hear a flare-up of whichever pest, because farmers are not yet on board with the proper rotation. I won't say they are not, but with the proper rotation of chemistries, not just by trade name, but by active ingredients. So it's very, again, this leads to the point that I made earlier. It's very important for farmers to read the manufacturer's recommendation. Take the time out to read. Don't just use a product based on hearsay. Oh, this is the one you, this is the one, this keyword, man. This is, no, it's your responsibility to read the labels. It's your responsibility to produce crops that are healthy and safe for human consumption. So it's your responsibility to know when not to spray. It's your responsibility to know when to read. It's your responsibility, not your neighbor, not your wife, not your husband. Your responsibility. So the onus is on the farmer to bring himself or herself in the know, and that's very easy. If you're unable to fully read, that is oftentimes why we do such a quick thing as color coding on the bottles. And that's why in our calendars, we offer those quick guidelines in our calendars, which most persons should be aware of now, to show and guide farmers how to properly use these chemicals, stick within the recommended rates, and quickly identify the pests that they can be used to control. Very, 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 and I will stress, very important to note. So I guess I'll have, before I ask for questions, I give my question. You know, my questions always have two parts.
Dale, before you ask your question though, there's a question on YouTube. Does adjuvants extend the PHI as well?
Does adjuvant extend the PHI as well? We have, there are adjuvants that can, won't say extend, I would use extend. There are adjuvants out there that can change the PHI, whether that is lowering or increasing the PHI. Definitely. As it speaks, so us here at our chemistries here at Carbon Chemicals, do we have adjuvants on the market now that can directly drop or increase the PHI? That would be a no. So ask my question now.
Yes, Dale, go ahead.
Give 2 reasons why pest ID is important and 1 CCJ product that can control both mites and insects. Need to repeat 2 reasons. 2 reasons why pest ID is important, and give me 1 CCJ product that can control both mites and pests and insects. Sorry. Very good. Oh, Stephanie's is this Stephanie allowed? Georgia?
Oh, it's not Stephanie from
Okay, okay. Well, that's just one part of the question, Stephanie. That's the B part of the question, Stephanie. What's the A part? 2 reasons why pest ID is important. A, B, 1 CCJ product that can control mice and insects. So if you answered B, we need to see answer for A. I need to do that quickly. What are we in again, Agassi?
No, a Caratrax. Mr. Wilmot is and is up.
Oh,
Mr. Wilmot.
Put that there.
Mr.
Yeah,
Wilmot.
I would say ID the crop, because by IDing the pest, it's going to give you the correct chemistry to use, and also it will identify the type of damage you're going to expect to see. I don't know.
That A, so everybody answer part. You take A, Stephanie take B. What is it? You know, working with each other?
Cure. We know it's a cure is a chemical, yeah?
Okay, Mr. Wilmot. Okay. Yes. So right. So it's very that those are 2 reasons why we want to ensure that we ID the pests, you know? For sure. And don't forget to know that we are talking about save money, you know.
Yes.
Well,
of course.
Paula Taylor, Dale. Paula Taylor in the chat says saves time and money.
Yeah, but
right. So it looks like you have to give away 3 prizes then, sir.
Well, teach them to work together, you know. So let them work together. Check them if I neighbor them in the church. Yeah. Nice. Definitely, I like that. And just to remind you all, we have upcoming activities. Tune in for 106 every Wednesday. Tomorrow will be no different. 6:18 in the morning. And we have a radio feature, our regular radio feature, farming today. And we'll be speaking about this same topic, insect and mite identification. I'll be there as well. Also have on the 16th, that is Thursday coming up, a webinar. We're speaking in conjunction with Case, and the topic will be from backyard garden to urban agriculture. So that is speaking about how we can now pull agriculture into the urban areas. So we move, and it's an expansion topic as well, because a lot of startups happen in the backyard situation, and they are now exploded into urban agriculture. Speaking more, that would take into consideration hydroponics, different types of growing methods. And on Thursday, the 16th, there will be a training, farmers training in St. Anne, and this will be in conjunction with RADA, and it will be hosted by PDA Dennis Leckie, and the topic will be general crop care in vegetables. And this will be in St. Anne's. So carbon chemicals very active in the field, as you can see, and you can always feel free to contact us or access our videos and training sessions on the different social media platforms as well.
Before we go, Dale, I'm going to be asking Paula, Mr. Wilmot, and Stephanie to send us a WhatsApp at 876-401-4766 with your contact information, so I can know where to send the gift to. Also, Keisha is asking, do we have any farmer training in St. Elizabeth? I will definitely have to check the training, Keisha, so you can send me a WhatsApp also with your number so I can tell you when and where in St. Elizabeth. And there is a question on YouTube. If Nizoran is only recommended twice, what else should cure be rotated with for mite control?
Oh, well, that's a, but if used correctly, you don't need to use Nizoran so much in the life of the crop now, because once you have controlled, remember the whole basis of pest control is to break the life cycle. That's what that's the aim of any pest control, to break the life cycle of pest. So if you use Nizoran and cure in the first to wipe out the adults and the eggs, then whatever adults may have escaped and we go again, we shouldn't have any eggs there to hatch up. And then we'll only have now the adults to control. But in short, what we have with cure, we also would, as I said, include it with the adjuvants like exit or breakthrough. On our side, our chemistries, we don't have much more to add to it, because the aim or the addition of Nizoran in that package was to control the eggs, the ovicidal. And that's the only ovicidal mite control that we have at CCJ in our arsenal. But as I said before, when used correctly, appropriately, it would be, those two would be sufficient enough to control. And remember, control doesn't mean trying to zero the field that you see no pests. It is just reducing the pest pressure to the point where it doesn't affect the economic value of the crop, right? So if you have a pepper field, a squirrel field, and you're seeing mites on a few trees or in a section plant, it is area of concern to be monitored, but it's not one that panic, oh, I need to get rid of so I don't see any mites at all. No, that is not the aim of a pest control program. Just to reduce the pest pressure so it doesn't affect economic value of the farm. Okay?
All right. And there's a question on YouTube again. How can I get a calendar? I don't know where you are, Andrea, but if you can send us your
You need to
number.
say where you are. You need to say where you are. If you're in my region, maybe you could get one still if you didn't in Northwest, but I can't help you if you're in the island. But them can get it to you still, you know.
We can get a calendar to you. Just send me your
Sure.
contact at 876-401-4766. That's the company's WhatsApp, and we will get your information and send it to you.
So Wilmot, everything mystic, man. No say a word.
All right. Me have a little question, or a little suggestion.
Yeah.
In the past, in recent times, there has been a lot of interest showed into CBD production. That's the medical marijuana and that sort of thing. I think it would be in the interest of your company to look at some programs designed for controlling whatever it may be in that type of crop also.
Yeah. True. It's something we have been looking into and something we'll continue to look into. Much respect for that. Yeah, man.
So they let me repeat the number. The WhatsApp number for everyone is 876-401-4766. I'm gonna put it in the Zoom chat also.
All right, then. Thank you again, everybody, for joining
Also,
in.
for our prizes, who should I send my address thing to?
So send it to the WhatsApp number.
Okay, I
I'm
didn't have a
putting it in
pen at
the
the
chat.
moment. You're going to put it in the chat?
It's in the chat right now. Yeah.
Okay, yes, I see. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
Thanks.
Cool. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining in. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you, Dale. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah,